This is a rather nuanced question. I don't know who asked it, and I'm curious to know what interest they have in it. I suppose that maybe there's something that they are relating to personally, but it's a topic that's not often discussed. The question is, what is the inner meaning of chalitza? What is the inner meaning of chalitza? Before you can answer the question, what is the inner meaning of chalitza, you have to answer, what is the inner meaning of yibum? Yibum is a mitzvah seideraisa that superficially seems incredibly, against women. It's a mitzvah, right? The law is that a man is not allowed to marry his brother's wife, even after he passes away. A man is allowed to marry his wife's sister if his wife dies. In other words, for a man to marry the sister of his wife, the wife has to have been deceased. But for a woman to marry the brother of her husband is not allowed even after he dies. And it's Isser Mitzvah, it's a Kodesh. It's a big Aveda. But sometimes this Aveda becomes a mitzvah. And that's why Yibum is so tricky. Because Yibum is taking a circumstance, which is marrying the wife of your brother, which is a terrible Aveda, and turning it around and making it a mitzvah if there are no children from the union, from the marriage, right? Or if the husband has no children from any marriage. That's why Masechta Yevamos is so complicated, because it's a mitzvah that if you make the slightest mistake, it's an Aveda. On the other hand, if it's not an Aveda, then there's a mitzvah to do Yibum. Now, what kind of mitzvah is this? A man dies, he has no children, and his brother has to marry his wife. And the standard answer is Gilgulim. It's a Kabbalistic idea. I don't know if there's an explanation less than that in Torah. Now, understand that it says in Sfarim, I looked it up in the Rambam, that Yibum is an ancient practice, meaning to say that before the Torah was given, people practiced Yibum. Now, when we say that before the Torah was given, people practiced Yibum, and when the Torah was given, we continue to practice Yibum, you must understand what that means. It means that there was a wisdom, there was a knowledge, which traces itself back to Adam Rishon, that existed in the ancient world, which isn't just people creating nonsensical laws, but they're rooted in the wisdom of the creation itself. In other words, we know that Adam Rishon studied Torah. We know that Noach studied Torah, and the others not only studied the Torah, but they practiced the mitzvahs. But it says in Sfarim, they knew it from the Kabbalah. They knew the mysticism, they knew the Soid, because they had very deep minds, and they're able to tap into Emes in whatever means, either through Chochmah or through Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh, and they had this secret wisdom. This secret wisdom was the basis for ancient practices, like the Rambam also writes about marriage, that Kaidem Matan Teira Adam Pegesh Isha B'Shuk, Ratzahu V'Hi, and so forth. And we hold that the laws of marriage that are in the Torah are based on the laws of marriage from before. Not because we're holding on to ancient practices, but because these ancient practices are part of the chokhmah of the Eibishter that humankind had from the beginning of time, from Adam and Chava. And the same is true of Yibum. Yibum existed before Matan Torah, so the Rambam writes and made in Nevuah, and that it was maintained. In Perek Mem Tes of Chele Gimel, it was held on to. The reason they had the practice of Yibum, Koydem Matan Torah, because they tapped into the spirit of the creation, which is Emes, Al Pi Torah, the Eibishter. And the idea of Yibum is a part of that. Why? Because of Gilgal Neshamas. This is brought in all the Rishonim that are based on Kabbalah. And of course, the source of Gilgal Neshamas and Torah is in Pashas Vayeshev, with the story of Yehuda and Tamar, where you have the occasion of Yibum. And then, of course, again, it's repeated in Pashas Kiseitzei, where the Pasha of Yibum is found. And the idea is that two brothers are Beza Nafim and Ashedish. They're two branches from the same root. And if they're Beza Nafim and Ashedish, biologically, they're Beza Nafim and Ashedish in their neshama. There's a relatedness between the neshama of two brothers. And of course, we know that every neshama is zocher and nekeva. Every soul is male and female. They're a unit. They're one soul divided up into two that rejoin. So if a brother passes away without any children, the concept of Yibum, the theoretical concept of Yibum is that his wife, the wife of the deceased brother, has a soul relationship with the brothers of that deceased because the two male souls have a connection. Now there's something you have to understand about Gilgulim. And that is, I'm going to give you a very simple example, okay? What does Gilgul Neshamas mean? That you have many souls that are the same, that come again and again. It's really not true. Souls don't come again and again. Souls have babies. The parent soul has a spark, which becomes a secondary soul and a tertiary soul. But there's a relatedness between souls. But you have to understand this. If a soul is reincarnated many times, it's in many different bodies. For example, those bodies are distinctive. The reincarnation is in the soul. The reincarnation is not in the body. So if a person's neshama is nizgalgal 100 times, or 1,000 times, or 10,000 times, it's the same neshama reappearing 10,000 times. And again, it's really not the same neshama. It's related souls, but the bodies are totally separate. And therefore, when Tchias HaMesim happens, each one of those souls reinvests itself in the body, because once a body is born, it never dies. So even though intermittently a person passes away, the body goes in the ground, and it's decomposed, and it's reduced to an etzem luz. But Tchias HaMesim means every piece of earth that held life lives again. So the souls may have a relatedness, which would argue that in Tchias HaMesim they should all become one again, but the bodies don't. Which is why when a soul in this life appeared many times, in Tchias HaMesim it's going to be in many different bodies. Here's the thing that's interesting. The female half of the neshama is like the body. Just like the body is not reincarnated, it's a separate body each time. When a neshama goes through Gilgul, the component of Gilgul is in the Zachar half of the neshama. The Nekeva half of the neshama and each Gilgul is different, is new. So, Reuven dies without children. Shimon marries Reuven's wife. Why? Shimon, the wife of Reuven, is the other half of Reuven. But the wife of Reuven, the other half of Reuven, is not connected to the source of what Reuven is connected to, because each time a female half of a soul emerges, it's a new thing, just like the body. So you don't have to concern yourself with that neshama's connection to earlier incarnations. So that's why the brother, who's a different neshama but related in a less direct way, can then complete the purpose of this neshama by marrying the wife. But we don't do Yibum nowadays, certainly amongst Ashkenazim, because it's practically impossible for a man to marry the wife of his brother, because it's a mitzvah, not because they find that they're compatible. Requires incredibly special people, pure people, virtuous people, principled people. Otherwise, it's doomed to fail. We don't do Yibum, we do Chalitza. And of course, the mitzvah of Chalitza is that she removes his shoe when she spits, and she says, Kocha Yosel Isha Shel Yivnez Beis Achiv, and all the people had to say 3 times Beis Chalutz Hanoah. Now, there's a lot of details in Chalitza. I'm just going to mention the fact about the shoe. Right? The shoe on the foot is like a body on a soul. Think about it. The clothing we wear are a body to our body, just like our body is a body to our soul. So there's a relation between a soul and a body. That in mysticism, this is the relation between a man and a woman. So when a man refuses to do chalitza, in other words, he's refusing to attach to a body that he has to complete because of a relationship to his brother, so she takes the body away. And that's the symbolism of taking the shoe off. Why the shoe? Because the shoe is the very bottom of the person, because this has a relationship with the children that they would bring into the world. The bottom of the person, the foot, is the source of what's going to come next, which are the children. So she removes his shoe, symbolizing that because he is refusing to complete a body mystically, that he has a mystical relationship with, therefore she takes the body off. Now the other aspects about spitting and saying kocha ya'asal ish asher lo yivne is based achev. Each one of those things also has significance, also has meaning, but I don't know it with a source. I'm just going to get to spitting. I'm going to mention that spit has to do with speech. You cannot speak without saliva, right? When a person has no moisture in his mouth, he becomes hoarse, which is called nichar groini, which is also a concept which is explained in Kabbalah, that if there's no moisture in your mouth and there's an inability to speak, it represents that there's a lack of transmission from a higher generation to a lower generation. So the significance of spitting, I'm suggesting, is to remove a necessary component of speech. And speech also has to do with procreation. The Eibishter created the world with speech. And in order for the words to come out clear, it's not enough that you have vocal cords and that you have ear, you also have to have moisture. So her spitting is symbolizing that there is a need to complete a body, which is represented by the shoe, by joining it with a related soul. And when one refuses to do that, you take that shoe away, you take that boot away, and you spit to connote that the power of speech, which is also associated with creation, and therefore the procreation is compromised. And then the third aspect is that she says kocha yasal ish, and everybody speaks beis chalutza. Now we'll save that for a different time. I just want to say that when someone asks a question like this, I have to answer it directly. I can't beat around the bush. These ideas may appear to some people to be very sexist, very against women. And I don't have time to make the long apology and to give all the gentle background that would accommodate that. So I'm answering the question directly, and I really don't mean to be offensive. I'm explaining to you based how I understand that Kabbalah explains it, but in no way is Torah anti-woman. It's just that Torah understands the role of women and the definition of a man, and the definition of, forget about role, the definition of a man, definition of a woman in a different way. And according to Torah, a man can't be with a woman and a woman can't be without a man. A man can't be without a woman can't be without a man. There's a mutual interdependence. Okay, I hope that's helpful.